everyone! Today we're going to be connecting Firebase Realtime Database, which is a technology that we've already used in previous videos, and we're going to be connecting this to Python so that we can upload and download data. We're also going to be doing CRUD operations with it, which we'll talk about later. So in this video, first we're just going to do a quick brush up on Firebase Database, although I've made multiple other videos about this. Then we'll talk about what our program in today's video will do, including what all the operations we're going to do, including CRUD operations, which we're going to do with Firebase Realtime Database. And then we'll just get straight into the demo, in which first we'll just do setup of connecting Python to Firebase Database, including installations, imports, and stuff like that. And then we're going to actually be doing all the different CRUD operations with Firebase Database. So what is Firebase Realtime Database? Firebase Database is a NoSQL database that stores and syncs data between all of the different users. So it's very useful for like web applications and mobile apps and literally just any application. It has real-time delivery and it uses JSON format, unlike Firebase's other database called Cloud Firestore, but that's for another video. Firebase Realtime Database is actually made for offline use and online use. Whenever and wherever you are, you can use Firebase Realtime Database with all of your apps. Now let's talk about what our Python program will do. So first of all, it's going to import and connect to Firebase using a module called Pyrebase, which we'll talk about in the demo, and we'll install it. And then it'll do CRUD operations on Firebase. And CRUD operations basically just stand for create, read, update, and delete. So it's going to create some data in our database, then it's going to read some data so we can query for data, and then it can update the records and also delete some records. Alright, and let's get straight into the interactive demo, in which we can connect Python to Firebase and run CRUD operations with it. Alright, so the first thing I want to do is go to Atom, which is my coding editor, so that we can actually write the code. So the module I'm going to use is Pyrebase, and it's spelled, let's just write a comment imports, and then we're going to import Pyrebase here. So Pyrebase is Python's Firebase module, and it has a bunch of different functions. One for Firebase Database, one for Firestore, one for storage, one for hosting, and a bunch more. But this time we're going to be using the Firebase Database one. So what we're going to have to do is first we have to get the config actually. So let's go back to Chrome and go to Firebase so that we can actually create a new project. So I'm going to go to my console here. And just a heads up, if you're new to Firebase and Firebase Database, then you can check out my other video, which is Introduction to Firebase. So when we're in the console, we have all of our projects, but right now I'm going to add a new one. All right, let's call this Connecting Firebase DB to Python. It's long, but it works. So I'm going to select all of these default accounts and all that. And then it'll create our project for us. So it's creating our project. And there we go. Okay, so it finished creating it, so I'm going to press continue. And right now you can add all these services, but I'm just going to add real-time database, so I'll go over there. And actually, before we do that, we have to first get the configuration to our Python. So how I'm going to do that is by pressing web here. So I'm going to add Firebase to my web app. And this nickname and all doesn't really matter. All we're trying to get is the configuration. So let's just say connecting Python to this. And then register that app. It doesn't actually do anything, but it just gives us this SDK. So all of this other stuff, this is written in JavaScript, but I only need this part since I'm going to be creating my own variable in Python syntax. So let's go back to Atom. And here we can create a variable called maybe like Firebase config. Or actually, let's just make it more simple, just config. And that will be equal to this stuff here. Oh no. Okay, let's put this all in curly brackets, curly braces, whatever you want to call it. And again, this works, but we need, these are in strings. All of these beginning parts, they're in strings, so we're going to add double quotes around them. And all of these values are needed, but we want to add one more, which is database URL. And we'll add that database URL so that we can actually connect to the database. But first we had to create the database in our Firebase project. So let me go back to Chrome and let's just go back to the console. So I'll just X out of this and then go to Realtime Database. And then here we'll create our database. And I'm going to start in test mode just so that I don't have to add all the configurations and change the rules. So anyone with the database reference will be able to edit it, but don't try to use the same database reference as me because I'll be deleting this project after. So as you can see, we have the URL of our database right now. Let me just close this out. We have the URL of this database. So I'm just going to copy this. And actually, if you open it up in the browser, then it just goes to the database, which is where we were before. So I'm going to go back to Atom. And you can add it anywhere. I'm just going to add it in the middle. Or you know what? Let's add it at the... No, it's okay. We'll add it here. So database URL. And then this will just get a reference to our database. Oh, why is that weird color? Okay, that's okay. So, and then we'll add the database URL here. Why is this weird color? Oh, okay, sorry, I forgot the comma at the end. There we go. So now we have a reference to our database using this database URL column. So now that we have all the configurations, let's start coding. So I'm going to create a variable called Firebase so that we can get a reference to Firebase itself, and then again we'll get a reference to the database. So first we have to initialize our app. So I'm going to use that Pyrebase module again. So pyrebase.initializeApp. I actually made another video connecting Firebase storage to Python, and that's kind of like this, but it'll change after. So initialize app, not just initialize. So initialize app, and then we need to provide some kind of configuration which includes all of this. Actually, when you're just initializing the app, you don't need the database URL, but since I'm using Firebase database, I'm going to add it. And the variable is called config here, so I'm going to provide that. And then we want to get a reference to our database. So if you're using other services within Firebase, like for example, let's say you're hosting it and you're using a database reference and let's say Firebase storage, then you can make different variables like storage and then get a reference to that, like that. But since we're only using database, I'm going to use just one variable. So let's call this variable database, and that will be firebase.database. So now that we initialized our Firebase app, and it's called Firebase here, so now I can use all of the functions that's in our Firebase app. In this case, database is one of the functions. And there is one function for each service that Firebase provides to us. Now we can actually create our data and then start with the CRUD operations. So let's just make some common data and we can change it up later. This is going to be in JSON format, by the way, since like I said before, Firebase holds data in JSON format. So let's say like age, let's make this kind of like a user's thing. So age will be, let's say 21. I'm going to include all of the major data types, but you can add any type of data type. It works with Firebase database. So I'm going to add a number data type, Boolean, and string. So let's also say like name. And then name can be, how about like Emily? And then let's just say like maybe for the Boolean, likes pizza. And that's obviously true. So there we go. We have some simple data, although you can add as many records and stuff as you want. So since this is NoSQL, there's no defined rows and columns. So you can add as many records as you want. In this case, I only added 3, like age, name, and likes pizza. So now we can actually start with the CRUD operations. So just to make this neat, let's just say instead of imports, this will be create data. Like I said before, CRUD operations stands for create, read, update, and delete. So the first thing we want to do is create some data in our database. So let's do that. Okay, so I have my database reference in this variable here. So let's just make it very simple. Let's say I want to push all of this data in this variable to the database. So I can say database.push and then the data. And in this case, it's defined in a variable called data. So it's very simple. Now what this will do is it'll connect to our Firebase using this config, and then it'll initialize the app and create a database reference, and then it'll add all of this data in our Firebase database. All right, so let's run this code. So I'm going to go to terminal here. And actually, before we run the code, we have to first pip install some of our modules. So I'm first going to pip install Pyrebase, which is the same module we talked about before. It connects Python and Firebase. So I'm going to pip install that. Oh, sorry, pip 3 install. Sometimes based on your operating system and your version, it's pip or pip 3 install. So Pyrebase. Okay, so it's saying requirement already satisfied because I already installed it. So now we're ready to run the program. So I'm going to say Python 3 and then the file name, which in this case is firebase.py. So firebase.py. And just a heads up, if you're going to run your Python program, then you have to be in the same folder that the program is in. Okay, so it didn't print anything because we didn't tell it to. But if I go to the real-time database, then there it is. So if I click on this little record kind of thing, then it shows age 21, likes pizza is true, and name is Emily. So there we go. And as you can see, it added the record really fast. That's why it's called real-time database. It adds everything real time. So even if you're a user on an app, then it adds it really fast. So as you can see, it doesn't really have a name. It's just this long ID. So let's add a name. And to add the names, we have to do a thing called child. We have to create a database child. So I'm going to comment this out for now. But I'm going to say database.child. And we use database.child in our Firebase storage video also that connects to Python. And let's just call this like maybe users. And then inside of that, this is kind of like a folder in our database, but not exactly since this is NoSQL. So then I'm going to add another child, and then this is going to be, instead of this ID, this will be like the name. So let's call this like first person, because this is the first person in our database. Person, there we go. And I'm not calling it Emily because when we get to the update part, I'm going to change the name of the person. That's why I'm just calling it first person. And then we want to actually set the data of it. So let's say dot set, because that's a function. And then we want to set this data again. And even if we change this, like let's say likes pizza is false, and maybe age is 51, then it'll add that data also. So let's go back to terminal after I've saved this and then run it again. Okay, there we go. It didn't give any errors. And if we go back, we have to go back to the database. Then it has users, and then inside of users, there's going to be multiple people, but in this case, there's only one. And in first person, the age is 51, likes pizza is false, and the name is Emily. There we go. That worked. So the next part, that was all for creating data. And like this, you can create multiple different records, but I only created one person in this case for users. And the next part is to read data. So it's kind of like querying some data out of our database. So let's go out of here. And the next thing we need to do, let me comment this out because we don't want to be creating more and more data. So for reading data, let's say I want to print this data that I find. First, I'm going to create a variable. Let's call this like Emily, because the name of the person in this case is Emily. So Emily equals database.child again. This is the same thing here. And since we're in that users kind of folder, I'm going to say that. And then first person, because I want to get the data from the first person, that first person record here. And then here, dot get. So this get function will get the data from this database. And then lastly, so that we know we got that data, let's just print it out. So Emily, which is the variable, dot val, which will just get the value of that Emily variable. So now if I save this, then I can go back to terminal and run this, and now it should actually print something. There we go. We have an ordered dict, which is a dictionary, and here we have age 51, likes pizzas false, and name is Emily. There we go. That worked. Let's go back to Adam, and the next thing we want to do is update data. So let me just copy this again and update data. So to update data, let's go back to the database here. So let's say I want to change the name from Emily to like maybe John. Then I can update that using the update function. So here again, we'll use database.child, and then since we're in that users folder, I'm going to say that, and then we want to update the first dot child again, because we want to update the first person record, first person. And then here we go. So now that we're in the correct record, I'm going to say dot update, and then here, and then since this is in JSON format, I'm going to write the updated record in JSON format. So curly braces, and then now we're going to change the name to be John. So John here. And then, now what it should do is, in our database, instead of Emily, then it should change that to John. So let's go back. Actually, did I save this? Yes, I did. So let's go to terminal and run this. And there we go. It didn't give an error. So let's go back here. And there we go. The name instantaneously changed to John. And like this, you can add more and more records and keep updating them. And the last part of the CRUD operation is to remove data or delete it. So here we have remove data. And there's two different things you can do. So first, you can just delete one value. Like for example, let's say you want to delete the age column, the age value. You can delete it manually here, but we're doing it programmatically. Or you can delete this whole node, which is first person. So first, let's just delete one value. So I'll write that here, delete one value. And to do that, let me just zoom in here. Okay, there. So to delete just one value, we're going to use that database.child again. So database.child, and then we're in that users folder, and then .child, because we're in the first person node. So first person, here we go. And then now that we're in the right node, we're gonna actually go in one step further. We're gonna go into this, let's say we want to delete the age value, the age record. So I'm going to say another .child, and then we're gonna go into this age. And then now we can just .remove. Remove is a function, not revolve, remove. There we go. So remove is a function that'll remove any node that you're inside right now. And in this case, we're in the age record. So it'll remove that record. So let me save this first and then go back to terminal and run this. Okay. So let's go back here, and there we go. It took out that age record totally. There we go. And the last thing we want to do is just delete this whole node. So in users, we'll want to delete this whole first person record. So let me first clear this, and then let's go back to Adam. And here, just because we don't want to delete that same value again, otherwise it'll give an error because there's no age record anymore. Now we want to delete whole node. So again, we're going to say database.child. Actually, you know what? We can just copy this. Okay. So the only change we need to do is take out this this last part, which is going into the child record. So now that we're in this first person node, it's going to delete the whole first person node. So then we should have nothing in users. So let's save this. Oh no, actually, this is not going to work because it's commented out. I didn't even notice that. Okay, there we go. So now it'll obviously connect to the database and all that. And then it'll delete this whole first person node. So let's save that and then go back to terminal. Not clear. Let's run this code. There we go. It worked. And then if I go back to Chrome, then there we go. In users, it's just saying null because there's no data in there. It took out that whole first person node. And just like this, you don't have to have just one value. You can have multiple different nodes like first person, second person, third person, and then just delete one at a. You can delete one of them, but I just showed one for simplicity. So let's go back here. And finally, we've successfully connected to Firebase database from Python, done all the configurations and initialized the app, all that. And then we ran all the different CRUD operations. We created some data in the database, we read the data, we queried for some, and then we printed it out. We updated data in a certain node, and then we removed data. First, we removed just one value, and then we deleted the whole node. There we go. So these are the basic CRUD operations written in Python, and it connected to Firebase Realtime Database. So we can actually rewrite the same statements that we used in the demo in different ways so that we can achieve our desired functionalities. Thanks very much for watching. If y'all had any doubts, please comment down below. I would love to help you out if you're stuck with any Firebase questions or issues. Please like, subscribe, all that jazz. Until then, you can learn anything.